I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, a recent meeting in Israel between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Foreign Minister of Egypt, Sameh Shoukry. This is the first time in 9 years that Egypt's foreign minister has visited Israel, and it comes 6 months after Egypt sent its ambassador back to Israel after a long absence. Of course, the Israeli-Egyptian peace, however cool it may be, has been invaluable to Israel in many ways, including, of course, the fact that Israel has not had to engage in any military confrontations with the largest Arab state in the region. But there have certainly been ups and downs in the Israeli-Egyptian détente, and the fact that Egyptian President al-Sisi has sent his foreign minister to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu is a significant diplomatic step that could be the harbinger of good things to come for Israel. Well, to help us understand what the Shoukry-Netanyahu meetings were all about, what prompted them, and what does each party hope to achieve through them, I'm most pleased to have on our JBS phones from Washington, D.C., one of America's leading experts on Middle East affairs, especially as they relate to the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, David Makovsky, the Ziegler Distinguished Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy and the director of its project on the Middle East peace process. David, thank you so much for joining us again.
I'm delighted, Mark. Always happy to be with you.
Thank you. David, what do you understand prompted Shoukry's visit to Israel at this time?
Well, we have to be a little humble and say, we can't say we know for certain. We can look at things he's saying and talk to people, as I did, also the U.S. government and Israel. And I think, what has to be clear is that Israel's security relationship with Egypt has been excellent ever since Sisi came to power, and there was an overturning of the Muslim Brotherhood. While Sisi's having a rough ride with the United States, this is probably the golden age in terms of dealing with Israel. They have many things in common, which is fighting ISIS in the Sinai, dealing with Hamas in Gaza. Neither of them are too thrilled with the Iranian nuclear deal, but there's enough here for converging interests, and Israel has really rolled out the red carpet for them, and whatever they could do, also in Washington. And what they've also another piece of it is that Sisi has. If he has to do something in the Sinai, for example, and it means involving more weapons than are permitted under the Egypt-Israel treaty, guess what? Israel is fine to turn a blind eye to all these things. So you've got this security relationship. I've joked with the Israeli defense minister that Israel is the first Sunni state to be Jewish, and the relations are very tight. So that's the big picture here in terms of the overall relationship. The second piece of it is, though, that the question is, well, why go public about it now? Even though, they have a treaty, the ambassador was brought back 6 months ago. And here, I think that each side has its own, I don't use the word agenda, but a set of priorities. I think for Netanyahu, he would like a peace process that would almost be a parallel track to what's going on in Paris, or which he feels is a forerunner to a Security Council resolution at the UN that would impose a solution on him on what we call the final status issues. And he thinks, being good with Egypt makes bilateral sense given their convergence of interest like I said, in the Sinai and Gaza. And the third element is that Israel keeps talking about it wants to engage the region and these other states. Well, it's clearly you start from the countries you know better, where you already have an existing treaty, and try to see where you can expand. So I think he's got a multiple of reasons. Now, why does the Egyptian, what's his interest to do this now? That's a good question. He has, I think, he would like to, the Palestinian issue is a pain for the Egyptians, too. I mean, being that they are perched in the Sinai, so they would like to see this issue resolved. And also, I think there's other things going on. like the Turkey-Israeli accord,
Yes.
and that you bring back the ambassador after all these years.
Yeah.
And Egypt and Turkey are very much at odds. And I think Netanyahu wanted to make sure that Sisi knows that this is not coming on his expense, and Israel's not going to give a foothold to Turkey and Gaza. They could do humanitarian projects, no problem, but that's not the same as, being the guardian of a port or anything of that nature. So I think Turkey is an issue that's very much on their mind. Another issue I think is on Egypt's mind is the whole issue of Ethiopia because of the headwaters of the Nile. And, the Egyptians are afraid that if Ethiopia goes ahead with this project called the Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, it'll end up diverting the waters that have traditionally gone to Egypt. So how can Israel help with that? Maybe things on the Hill. They, I think, believe that being friendly with Israel is also helpful to them in terms of getting support on Capitol Hill with members of Congress. So they've had some issues with the administration. The administration's had issues with them, but the relationship so far continues. And anyway, that's all I say for now.
Excellent. By the way, you do write that you wrote a wonderful piece in a policy alert called "Egyptian Visit to Israel Could Preempt International Peace Initiatives." I'm going to ask you about that in 1 second. But in your piece, you mentioned that Netanyahu did visit Africa, and he spent a great deal of time in Ethiopia, and that's what you mean by referring to perhaps Israel can help prevent this dam.
If I didn't thanks for finishing my thought on that. So, I'm sure the way these things happen sometimes is he might call Sisi and say, look, I'm going to Africa. Can I put in a good word for you and everything?
Yes.
And he might say, well, Ethiopia is somewhere we care a lot about. There's a big OAU meeting coming up, Organization of African States. It would be very helpful if you engage the leadership in Ethiopia about the dam project and make sure that it doesn't come at the expense of Egypt. No diversion of water and things like that. So I think, Sisi sent the foreign minister Abu Red to get a first-hand personal account of Netanyahu's trip.
Right.
And then I think that's a piece of it. Doesn't mean that they're going to agree on everything, but I do think that Netanyahu gets that. If you want a friend, be a friend.
Yes.
And I think he's very proud for him that this was done in public. A lot of the security stuff Abu Red at the foreign ministry doesn't handle anyway, and there's a security channel for that, which is very low key. But this was, you're right to say this is a big deal. The first visit in 9 years, and the one 9 years ago wasn't even an exclusive visit. It was an Arab League peace conference.
Yes,
a peace initiative meeting.
In the Jewish community, we've heard a great deal about how we wanted so much more out of the Israel-Egyptian peace negotiation and treaty, but the bottom line was Israel has not had to go to war on its southern border, and at the moment it looks like, and you point this out, that with al-Sisi now looking for a different kind of relationship with Israel, the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty could benefit Israel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, what people don't forget, and you in your setup piece kind of alluded to it, but I think I want to make it a little more explicit for your listeners. Israel, after the 1973 war, 40% of its GDP was going for either military budget, because remember, Israel fought wars 48, 56, 67, 73, 4 wars in a very short period of time, in 25 years. But today, I think, estimates, I think it's top end, and I think this includes U.S. aid, so it's probably even less, but let's say it's $13 billion out of an economy that's $300+ billion. So, that is, you have to assume that this is a huge savings for Israel.
Yes.
It's not the war and peace that, everyone we have kumbaya at the pyramids together. But the point is when you think of Israel's quality of life, and many of your listeners have been in Israel, if Israel had to divert 40% of its GDP to the military, the quality of life, the standard of living would be drastically reduced.
It'd be a different country.
Evident. And so when we say, oh, it's a cold peace, I've heard that a million times. And it is on a certain level between peoples. But I think in the big picture, as you pointed out, nobody's killing anybody. And despite all the turmoil, Sadat is shot and killed. Mubarak is put in jail because Morsi comes in. Then Sisi comes in and gets rid of Morsi. I mean, think of how topsy-turvy this has all been. But guess what? During this whole thing, the Egyptians did not cut off relations with Israel.
Yes.
And so it survived these earthquake shocks, and it's still ticking well. So I mean, I think that we should never take things for granted. I'm
very, very good.
That, but I think we should also remember, what was achieved here.
David, you have written that Netanyahu has expressed concern that the Obama administration will consider supporting a UN Security Council resolution on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which would, in essence, impose a peace solution and other details on Israel and the Palestinians, which you write neither side would accept. That Netanyahu does not believe Israel can't accept it. He doesn't think the Palestinians would accept it. If neither side will accept it, why does this potential, why does it bother Netanyahu what happens at the UN?
It's a good question. I think the issue here is that he's afraid that once an imposed solution is approved by the UN, that becomes the new baseline. And the net effect is, Abbas, in his view, look, I've tried negotiating with the guy, he ran away, he'll say, and there's no way he can do this. He can't solve, well, maybe we could solve the territory, but can they do the refugees? Can they do Jerusalem? Can they do, security arrangements? So I think on one hand, he's more of an incrementalist, and he's afraid that, that when he does this, I mean, if he would do it, I think he's afraid that things would go haywire. And so he's very much afraid of Obama imposing a solution after the election and before the inauguration. That it becomes the new baseline, and for people who want to, do things with Israel, he's afraid that there'll be sanctions. Let's say there's European sanctions next year, and they'll say, "Oh, here, this thing that you guys did in November at the Security Council, not 242, we're going to call it 242.20, something like that, whatever it is." Well, you haven't done that. Well, you see, but neither of the Palestinians, they don't like the term mutual recognition when it comes to saying that Israel is a Jewish state, or nation state of the Jewish people, however you want to call it. So I think that this is part of the problem. Israel's view is there's no one home here to do the grand deal. But I think that to do nothing is also a mistake, because this problem is not going away.
Yes.
And so if you could solve even part of the way, for example, two things. You could say no more settlement activity beyond the barrier, the fence. That would be huge. If you could say, and I don't know if you can, but that any settlers who want to come back, we'll compensate them for their homes. Those would be two powerful things. Now, the Palestinians have to do things too. They should also stop incitement, and they should, admit that, it's not just the incitement piece of this, but, there's the whole terrorism side. So they can just say, look, we're not going to press the anti-normalization case, which they've been doing, which is, you can't fraternize. How are we going to have peace if we can't get regular people to have grassroots things together?
Of course. David, is it fair to say, and I want to pick up on this very idea now, is it fair to say that you and the Washington Institute have been strong proponents of the two-state solution as a way of making peace between Israel and the Palestinians?
It works that Dennis Ross and I are the two kind of point people to see what's possible. It might not be possible, but we're guided by a sense of realism. We would like something that if these leaders, if they're not committed, we know it's going to go nowhere.
Okay, but
we think through persuasion is the best way.
Okay. Is it also fair to say that the underlying premise of a two-state solution is that both sides, Israeli and Palestinian, are prepared to share the land with each other in two separate states that would live side by side, if not in peace, David, they would live without hostility?
Yeah,
okay.
That's the goal.
Okay. There seems to be more and more Israelis who now, sadly, believe that the jihadist mentality sweeping the Muslim world, including the Palestinians, makes it impossible for Palestinian leadership to agree to the concept of sharing the land in a two-state solution. Are they right or are they wrong?
It's a little of each. I mean, look, I put things in baseball terms because I love baseball.
That's fine.
I would say the United States, we've tried to hit the home run ball 3 times. Bill Clinton in 2007 in Annapolis 2000 at Camp David, and then that effort of December and January 2001. He even started at Camp David itself, summer of 2000. So they know the issues. I don't think the problem is the parties can't coordinate or can't understand each other, but there's just no trust here for the grand deal. So, I think it's a problem. The other element is that besides, we've at the Institute, we're not in the view that you can't, don't say never and say, well, if they don't take the full leap, then everything else is worthless. That's not my style. I think that we got to see what's possible. I think even if you care a lot about the U.S.-Israel relationship, the things that can't be done, my view is not that different from the book of commanders in Israel sort of thing, and they very much, say, do what you can do now and think about the rest later. But it's that's what's really needed is an approach to to do what's possible. If you try to hit the home run ball, you're going to strike out. You're better off trying singles and doubles. What are those singles and doubles? I'll just give you 2 as an example. And it relates to the topic of our discussion today, which is maybe on the other side of the barrier, which is where 92% of the West Bank is located, that Israel says as a policy, we haven't tried to settle that many there, and we're not, these people are, we're going to the peace conference and we're going to discuss it there. But once you get into the spiraling upward, it's a little dangerous because the parties say, no, I can't, and, they lock themselves into a corner. So it's very delicate. But maybe, we don't try to do a grand deal here, but we just try to do what's possible, not what might be ultimately desirable.
Yes, and Bo, you have been arguing that now for quite some time, and you do it very effectively. I still need more help, though. Alon Ben Meir, another individual who writes a lot and was involved in some negotiations between Israel and Turkey and other. He's very respected. He's at NYU. Alon Ben Meir has written that Israeli settlements have been built on Palestinian land. As far as you are concerned, David, as our viewers are watching you right now, what would you say? Has any Israeli settlement been built on Palestinian land?
Well, it's a good question, and it's funny. I'm working up on a map on this stuff. There is some, that is private. I mean, the Prime Minister, Benny Begin, when he was in government, tried to move, I think, Amona, which the court reformed had to be done today. They say they're not leaving, but basically, these are much more often middle-class people who work at supermarkets and things like that, and buy groceries like everyone else. And I think they're stunned by by the news there. But I don't think it's that surprising.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the answer. Are settlements? Has Efrat been built on Palestinian land?
I don't think Efrat has been, but there's been some building on on private
Okay,
land.
I want to press you here. Is Ma'ale Adumim built on Palestinian land?
Yeah, well, we have to go through. There's Ma'ale Adumim, the city or town.
Any part of it?
Ma'ale Adumim, the block. Not all of the block has been fenced in, so to speak, because you have like a place like Far Adumim, which is across a big highway, and so I mean, I think I need to. I don't want to go further on this, but
is any part of Ma'ale
Adumim
on Palestinian land?
I got you. Look, I don't want to pronounce now, but I'm happy to follow up with you.
Okay, is Ariel built on Palestinian land?
Same point. Ariel is probably the most contentious issue out there.
Okay, and this is my point, and to the extent to which you can, and I understand these are very complicated. Okay, but to the extent to which you can, what defines Palestinian land anywhere from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea?
Why is there no A, B, C, D, E for Palestinian kind of thing?
I want to know. Here's what I see.
Yeah.
I see at the moment a UN resolution in 1947 to be implemented in 1948, which the Arab world rejected. And they've rejected that resolution from day one. They basically said no from 1938 till today. And what happened was there was a war in which Israel won a certain amount of territory, and irrespective of the UN partition plan, a state of Israel came into being with a green line, armistice line, being the eastern border of the state of Israel. Between the eastern border and the Mediterranean Sea, there was land grabbed by Jordan, which nobody recognized in terms of international law. It was disputed territory. In 1967, in a defensive war, Israel ends up in control of what we now call the West Bank. The West Bank was not Palestinian land, and no land from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea is ipso facto Palestinian land unless Palestinians and Israelis agree to share the land. I don't understand why Alon Ben Meir would use the phrase, Israel has built settlements on Palestinian land. And don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying there are not practical, emotional problems to Israel building communities on the West Bank. But I don't understand why any Jew, or for that matter, why David Makovsky would call land of the West Bank Palestinian land until the Palestinians agree that there will be a two-state solution.
Look, in my case, I think Israel also will say they don't want to build on private land that belongs to somebody else. Yes, there was no, you're not reverting sovereignty back to what was before 1967, because then it was Jordan, and Jordan doesn't exist. Doesn't exist on the West Bank anymore. And Jordan has washed its hands of all this. Look, it comes down to me something very simple, which is, some people might associate me with maps, but the bigger point for me is the following, is that these two people, there's just too much history and too little geography. And, Israel does not want a situation where you have a minority of Jews that are ruling a majority of Arabs. That's one thing. And that is something, not the only thing. Israel's relation with the United States, and as you pointed out, it's a great friendship that goes on between these military leaders. As the countries develop relations, they develop personal relations. But I think it would be useful for the listeners of this program to hear, some of the candidates speak about these issues. I think there is a sorting out that is, we'll have to see. But I think there is going to be a sorting out.
Okay. What you're really saying is, yes, this is a very complex problem, and a lot of misunderstanding occurs in the media, between countries, and even between Israel and the Palestinians, yes? A great deal of misunderstanding.
Look, there's a lot of each one has their own narrative on what happened in 1948. We're never going to solve the past, Mark. We're not going to be able to do it. Maybe professors on both sides in 100 years can say who did what to who in 1947 and 1948. We're not going to be able to solve that now. I think what our kids demand of us is that we settle the present and the future and leave the past to the past.
Okay. By the way, I'm not arguing we should hang on to the past. What I'm saying is there is a present today. And the present today seems to be, and when you speak to more and more Israelis, this is what they say, we would love to make a two-state solution. We offered it 3 times. There's 85% of the Israeli people were ready to trade land for peace. But nobody wants to trade with us.
This is the problem is that Israel. Here's the dilemma of a bilateral or unilateral step. The danger of the unilateral step is obviously you pull out of Gaza, you pull out of Lebanon, but you do it without understandings on the other side. And even though Israel didn't demarcate the border with the United Nations in 2000, but the partner that you have, to the extent you have one, is based on doing the whole enchilada. The whole deal. That means the middle of Jerusalem. You have to deal with that. You have to deal with security arrangements in a volcanic era that we're in now in the Middle East. So it could be that this is a few bridges too far, and therefore, what does the Talmud say, or the chapters of the Fathers? Tafasta maruba lo tafasta. You try to go for too much, you get you overreach, you miss, and I think that's true. So, I mean, it's a rough situation that things are at, but I don't think we should try to hit the home run ball. You see what I mean? Solve it all. We tried in 2000, 2007, 8, the 2013, 14 period. I was with Kerry. These were all noble efforts as far as I'm concerned. But if the lesson is with these leaders who are so, as you say, I'll use the term risk averse in such a profound way, that these guys are more interested in seizing, not seizing opportunities, but, trying to discern dangers. And you need a leader who can do both. It's not simple.
Yes. David Makovsky, it is always wonderful to have the opportunity to speak with you. You bring such reason and understanding to, again, the most complex issues. I always appreciate your giving us some time, and I'll chase you all the time, David. Thank you very much.
I'm always happy to go on with you.
Thank you, my friend. David Makovsky, the Siegler Distinguished Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy and the director of its project on the Middle East peace process. And you heard him. These issues are so complex. At the same time, I think that when one tries to sort it out and see the problem as clearly as possible, it comes down to one overriding theme. And you've heard me say it over and over again. I will continue to say it until somebody can give me a reason not to. You have two peoples. The way to peace is to share the land. But if one group, if one party does not want to share the land, nothing can be done. And that's the tragedy right now of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And it's not Israel's fault. My thanks, as always, to our director, Sloan Copeland, production coordinator, Serge Goldberg, editor, Dennis Golan, JBS Associate Director, Dara Golub, and to the producer of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.